We will talk about the negotiations with Iran and what went wrong in Islamabad. Now with us is Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us. What happened and where do we go from here?
Well, Brett, I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think that some things went right. We made a lot of progress and made it very clear what the terms were under which the United States could make concessions, on which points we were flexible, and what was absolutely essential for the president to feel that he was getting a good deal. And so we laid out all these issues. We had good conversations. It was the first time that the governments of Iran and Zakir met at such a high level, perhaps in the history of Iran's current leadership. That, I think, is something positive. And again, we really made some progress in the negotiations. The question now is whether the Iranians will have enough courage. That material was buried underground by Operation Midnight Hammer. But if you think about it in the long term, the president doesn't want to leave the next president or the one after that worried about this program. So we'd like to get that material out of the country completely so that the United States has control. That's number one. And the second thing is that, again, regarding verification, it's one thing for the Iranians to say they won't have a nuclear weapon. It's another thing for us to establish the mechanism to ensure that doesn't happen. Part of that is, of course, making sure they don't have the capability to enrich uranium, which is how they got so close to a nuclear weapon before. So those are the two things where, frankly, I think the Iranians have made some progress. They've moved in our direction. That's why I think we would say we've had good signs, but they haven't gone far enough. And so what we decided was, you know what, since we don't think this team and this current timeline will be able to close a deal, let them go back to Tehran. We're going back to Washington, and that's where we are today.
So is there a next step? Will there be more talks soon? Are they held in Pakistan and are you in charge?
That's an interesting question, Brett. Fundamentally, it's up to the Iranians to answer because the ball is in their court. We made it clear where we can be flexible and where the nuclear material must absolutely leave Iran. Now, what's interesting about this, Brett, it's that in the process of conducting these negotiations, I think we gained some knowledge about how the Iranians are negotiating. And that's why we left Pakistan, because what we found out is that they couldn't, I think the team that was there couldn't close a deal, and they had to go back to Tehran, whether it was to the supreme leader or someone else, and really get approval for the terms we had set. So again, whether we'll have more talks, whether we'll reach an agreement, I really think the ball is in Iran's court because we've put a lot on the table. We actually made it very clear what our red lines were. We also made it clear, Brett, that we would be very happy. The President of the United States said he would be very happy if Iran were treated like a normal country, like a normal economy, and if its people could prosper. But for Iran to be a normal country economically, it will have to be a normal country when it comes to not seeking nuclear weapons, and it will have to be a normal country by not pursuing terrorism. So really, I think there's a great deal to be made here, but it's up to the Iranians, I think, to take the next step.
I hear you talking about enriched uranium and a nuclear weapon and their inability to have one in the long term. I don't hear you mentioning the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz without fees. Is that one of the red lines?
That's one of the things we've talked about, Brett. We need to see the Strait of Hormuz fully open. Honestly, that's a point where the Iranians tried to change the rules during the negotiation. We made it clear that this is unacceptable. In the negotiation, we said the Panukowi offer a ceasefire and stop the bombings. In exchange, we expect the Iranians to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz. As the president said, we've seen a significant increase in traffic passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That's good for the global economy. That's also good for the United States of America. But we still haven't seen that full reopening. Our expectation is that the Iranians will continue to make progress in opening the Strait of Hormuz. If they don't do it, that will change our negotiations with them.
You're not surprised. After all, the Iranians usually talk about negotiations in a different way. The Iranian foreign minister posted, "In high-level talks, Iran acted in good faith with Zilinsenkwara to end the war. But near Molde and Islamabad, we saw maximalism, shifting goals and blockades. Nothing was learned. Goodwill generates goodwill. Hostility generates the same. It doesn't look like they'll return to the negotiating table anytime soon. The ceasefire is still in effect." After that, does the war start again?
Brett, I thank Marshal Munir and the Prime Minister of Pakistan. They were incredible hosts and remarkable statesmen as they mediated talks between us and the Iranians. Again, two countries that hadn't had serious talks for a long time. Regarding the statement by Foreign Minister Araghchi, if you look at what he said, yes, there's a bit of bravado. But between the lines, he says that we were just inches away from an agreement. It suggests that the Iranians are very interested in reaching an agreement and have actually come quite close to our position over time. Oh, the stage of the negotiations. But one thing I'll say, Brett, is that the Iranians are very different negotiators from us in the United States. What I, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff did was make it very clear, these are the things we're willing to concede, but these are the things we need to have. We need the enriched material to be out of Iran. We need their definitive commitment not to develop a nuclear weapon. If the Iranians are willing to accept this point, then this could be a very good deal for both sides. If not, the decision is theirs and the responsibility is theirs and the ball is in their court. The future depends on the Iranians. As the President of the United States says, we have the cards. The military advantage is ours. Now we have additional economic pressure that we are putting on them through the blockade we imposed on their oil leaving through the Strait of Hormuz. So we have a lot of cards, we have the advantage, and let's see how the Iranians will deal with that.
That's how the blockade works. Zero warships stop Iranian ships going to the Strait of Hormuz.
Not just Iranian ships, Brett, but any vessel going to or coming from Iranian ports. We'll probably see attempts to change flags, but we'll know about it because our intelligence is excellent regarding which ships come and go that are linked to Iran. But Brett, here's the very interesting point about all this. The only thing the Iranians did, they didn't defeat us militarily. Their armed forces were decimated. They couldn't make any progress when it comes to the use of weapons of war. What they did was commit this act of economic terrorism against the whole world. They threaten any ship that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. As the president showed, two can play this game. If Iran tries to commit economic terrorism, we follow the principle that no Iranian ship is safe. That applies on the way out, too. We know this is important and creates economic leverage. And Brett, the president, wants the Iranian people to prosper and succeed. He instructed his team to present a serious proposal. The decision is now with Iran. Have we made any progress? Yes, but let's find out from the Iranians if we can take the decisive step toward a big agreement.
The president also said he wants this to end soon, as quickly as possible. They're saying that you had real skepticism about this at the beginning and that you expressed that to the president. Is that true?
Well, Brett, I give my advice to the president, and I hope that when I give advice to the president, it remains confidential because the president needs to be able to trust his top advisors without them running to the media. What I can say, Brett, is that I agree 100% with the president that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I saw that clearly in the negotiations we had. In the last few days, it has become clear that they are tough negotiators, but fundamentally, they are the kind of people whose possession of a nuclear weapon would impose terrible costs on the entire world. If they are willing to engage in economic terrorism against the whole world, what would that mean? What kind of leverage would they have with a nuclear bomb in Tehran? That outcome is not acceptable to us. Therefore, I fully support the president's goal of keeping nuclear weapons and the worst weapons of war out of the hands of the Iranians.
Mr. Vice President, you say there has been progress and that the trip to Pakistan was not fruitless. However, I'm not hearing what the next step will be if the Iranians don't act. You also campaigned for Viktor Orbán in Hungary, and he was defeated after 16 years in power. I'd like to know your opinion on whether it was worth going to support Viktor Orbán in that contest, considering that he lost badly and is one of the only European leaders who supports Vladimir Putin.
Brett, I think Viktor Orbán is a fantastic leader, and his legacy in Hungary is truly transformative. 16 years fundamentally changing that country. But we decided to do this, Brett, not because we were ignoring the polls. We knew that Viktor had a high chance of losing that election. We did this because he is one of the few European leaders we've seen willing to stand up to the bureaucracy in Brussels, which has been very, very bad for the United States. So, for example, when a European bureaucrat attacks an American company, sometimes the only vote to protect that American interest was Viktor Orbán's. We didn't go just because we expected Viktor to win the election easily. We went because it was the right thing to do to support someone who has been on our side for a long time. This wasn't about Russia, and fundamentally it wasn't about Europe, but about the United States and him being a good partner for me and for the president personally. I'm sorry that he lost. We will work very well with the next Prime Minister of Hungary. It wasn't a bad trip at all because it's worth supporting people even if you don't win every contest.
Just a moment, Vice President.
O Special Report segue com o vice dos Estados Unidos.
Right away.